A girl runs through the field in 1889. When historians zoom in, they freeze in shock. What they discovered in this single photograph would challenge everything we thought we knew about a quiet farming town and reveal a dark secret that had been hidden for over a century. Dr. Sarah Lockwood had spent 15 years studying old photographs at the National Archives. She thought she had seen everything: faded family portraits, blurry street scenes, and countless images of people long forgotten. But on a rainy Tuesday morning in March, she stumbled across something that would haunt her dreams for months to come. The photograph arrived in a donation from the estate of Harold Whitman, whose family had lived in Millbrook, Ohio since the 1800s. The image showed a young girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, running across an open field. Her dress flowed behind her as she moved, and her face showed pure joy. At first glance, it seemed like any other childhood memory captured in time. Sarah cataloged the photo as item number 1889-MB-0047. The date was written in faded ink on the back, along with a single word that made her pause. Emma. Nothing else. No last name, no location details, just that one simple name written in careful handwriting. Something about the image bothered Sarah, though she couldn't put her finger on what it was. The girl's expression seemed normal enough. The field looked like any other rural landscape from that time period. The quality was surprisingly good for 1889, but that wasn't unheard of. Still, she decided to take a closer look. Using the archive's high-resolution scanner, Sarah created a digital version of the photograph. She zoomed in on different sections, examining every detail: the grass in the field, the trees in the background, the girl's clothing, her facial features. Everything seemed ordinary until she reached the far edge of the image. There, barely visible in the shadows of a distant tree line, were shapes that didn't belong. At first, Sarah thought they might be farm animals or perhaps other children playing nearby. But as she adjusted the contrast and brightness, the shapes became clearer. They were people, adults, and they were watching the girl. Sarah counted at least 6 figures standing perfectly still among the trees. They were positioned in a way that suggested they were deliberately hiding, observing the running child without her knowledge. Their postures seemed tense, almost predatory. But what disturbed Sarah most was that they all appeared to be wearing identical dark clothing, like uniforms. Curious about the photograph's origins, Sarah began researching Millbrook, Ohio in 1889. The town had been small, with a population of just under 400 people. Most residents were farmers or worked in the local grain mill. By all accounts, it was a peaceful community where everyone knew their neighbors. Sarah found records of births, deaths, and marriages from that year. She looked through old newspaper archives, hoping to find mention of a girl named Emma. What she discovered instead were gaps. Strange, unexplained gaps in the local records that seemed to center around the late summer of 1889. The Millbrook Weekly Herald, which had published every Friday without fail since 1875, was missing 3 consecutive issues from August and September 1889. The county clerk's office had no birth or death certificates filed during that same period. Even church records from the town's 2 congregations showed no entries for nearly 6 weeks. Sarah contacted the Millbrook Historical Society, hoping someone there might have information about the photograph or the missing records. The society's president, an elderly woman named Margaret Foster, agreed to meet with her the following week. Margaret had lived in Millbrook her entire life. Her family had been among the town's first settlers, and she knew the local history better than anyone. When Sarah showed her the photograph, Margaret's face went pale. She stared at the image for a long time without speaking. "Where did you get this?" Margaret finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah explained about the estate donation and her research into the missing records. Margaret nodded slowly, as if pieces of a puzzle were falling into place in her mind. "My grandmother used to tell stories," Margaret said. "Stories about the summer of 1889. I always thought they were just old wives' tales, meant to scare children into behaving. But seeing this photograph makes me wonder if there was truth in what she said." According to Margaret's grandmother, something terrible had happened in Millbrook during the late summer of 1889. A group of outsiders had come to town, claiming to be researchers studying rural communities. They set up camp on the outskirts of town and began observing the residents, particularly the children. The visitors asked strange questions about family histories, bloodlines, and inherited traits. They measured children's heads and took detailed notes about their physical characteristics. Parents grew uncomfortable, but the visitors had official-looking documents that claimed they were working for the government. Then children started disappearing. It began with Emma Crawford, the 8-year-old daughter of the local blacksmith. She vanished while playing in the fields behind her house. Her parents found her dress torn and bloody near the tree line, but no sign of Emma herself. The town organized search parties, but they found nothing. Over the next few weeks, 4 more children disappeared under similar circumstances. Each time, parents found torn clothing and traces of blood, but no bodies. The visitors claimed they were helping with the search efforts, but several townspeople noticed they seemed more interested in studying the crime scenes than actually looking for the missing children. Margaret's grandmother had been 12 years old at the time. She remembered hiding in her family's root cellar with her younger siblings whenever the visitors came through town. Her parents had whispered about strange lights seen in the woods at night and unexplained sounds that echoed across the fields after dark. The visitors left town suddenly in early October, Margaret continued, just packed up their camp and disappeared overnight. The sheriff found their campsite empty except for some equipment they'd left behind. Scientific instruments, notebooks filled with measurements and observations, and jars containing... Margaret paused, looking uncomfortable. Jars containing what? Sarah asked. Specimens. Hair, teeth, small bones, things that might have come from children. The sheriff had burned everything according to the story. He'd also ordered that all records from that period be destroyed, claiming it was better for the town to forget what had happened and move on. The families of the missing children were given small payments and told never to speak publicly about their losses. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she looked at the photograph again. The girl in the image, Emma, was running across the field with joy on her face. She had no idea that hidden figures were watching her from the trees, waiting for their moment to strike. But there was something else bothering Sarah about the image. She'd been studying old photographs long enough to recognize the subtle signs of staging or manipulation. Something about the girl's pose, the way the light fell across the scene, suggested this wasn't a candid moment captured by chance. Back at the archives, Sarah examined the photograph under a magnifying glass. She studied every detail of the girl's expression, her posture, the way her dress moved as she ran. Then she noticed something that made her stomach turn. The girl's shadow was wrong. Based on the angle of light in the image and the shadows cast by the trees and grass, the girl should have had a long shadow extending behind her as she ran. Instead, her shadow was short and fell directly beneath her feet, as if she were standing still rather than running. Sarah realized with growing horror that the photograph had been staged. The girl hadn't been running freely across the field. She'd been posed, forced to stand in that position while the camera captured the image. The flowing dress and joyful expression were illusions created through careful positioning and timing. But why would someone stage such a photograph? And why would they include the watching figures in the background if they were trying to create an innocent childhood scene? Sarah spent hours studying the image, looking for other signs of manipulation or staging. She found them everywhere once she knew what to look for. The grass around the girl's feet was flattened in a perfect circle, as if she'd been standing in that spot for an extended period. Her hands were positioned unnaturally, gripping something that wasn't visible in the photograph. Most disturbing of all were the girl's eyes. Sarah had initially thought they showed joy and freedom, but under closer examination, she could see something else. Fear. The girl's smile might have been forced, her pose artificial, but her eyes revealed her true emotional state. This wasn't a photograph of a child playing in a field. It was documentation of something far more sinister. Sarah contacted a forensic photographer who specialized in analyzing historical images. Dr. James Wright had worked with law enforcement agencies to examine crime scene photographs and had developed techniques for detecting manipulation in old images. When Dr. Wright examined the photograph, he confirmed Sarah's suspicions. The image had definitely been staged, and there were signs that it might have been one of a series. The camera position and lighting suggested multiple exposures had been taken, though only this one had survived. More troubling were the figures in the background. Dr. Wright's analysis revealed details that weren't visible to the naked eye. The watching figures were all adults, and they appeared to be holding objects, ropes, tools, and what looked like scientific instruments. "This isn't a family photograph," Dr. Wright told Sarah. "It's documentation. Someone was recording an event, and they wanted to capture both the subject and the observers." Sarah knew she needed to find out what had really happened to Emma Crawford and the other missing children of Millbrook. She returned to Ohio and spent days in the county courthouse, searching through old legal documents and property records. What she found painted a horrifying picture. In October 1889, just after the visitors left town, several large parcels of land were quietly purchased by a company called the Institute for Human Development. The purchases were made through intermediaries, and the true buyers' identities were hidden behind layers of legal paperwork. The Institute had been founded by Dr. Marcus Pemberton, a physician who'd been expelled from Harvard Medical School for conducting unauthorized experiments on patients. Pemberton believed that certain genetic traits could be enhanced through selective breeding and environmental manipulation. He'd been recruiting subjects from rural communities across the Midwest, focusing on children who displayed what he considered superior physical or mental characteristics. The missing children of Millbrook hadn't been randomly chosen. They'd been specifically selected based on observations and measurements taken by Pemberton's research team. Sarah found shipping records that showed regular deliveries from the Institute's property to medical colleges and research facilities in major cities. The manifest listed anatomical specimens and research materials, but provided no details about their origins. The Institute had operated for only 2 years before being shut down by federal authorities in 1891. By then, Pemberton and his associates had vanished, leaving behind empty buildings and destroyed records. The property was eventually sold to a farming family who reported finding unmarked graves scattered throughout the woods. Local authorities had quietly moved the remains to the town cemetery, listing them only as unknown deceased, 1889 to 1891. No investigation was conducted, and no charges were filed. The families of Millbrook's missing children never learned what had happened to their sons and daughters. The photograph of Emma Crawford wasn't a childhood memory. It was evidence of a crime that had been covered up for over a century. The girl's staged pose, the watching figures, the forced smile hiding terrified eyes, all documented the final moments before she disappeared forever. Sarah published her findings in a historical journal, hoping to bring attention to the forgotten victims of Millbrook. The article sparked interest from genealogists and local historians who began researching their own communities for similar patterns of missing children and mysterious visitors. What they found suggested that Pemberton's Institute had been just one part of a larger network of researchers conducting illegal experiments across rural America in the late 1800s. Dozens of small towns had experienced similar disappearances, followed by the same pattern of destroyed records and enforced silence. The photograph that had seemed so innocent at first glance had revealed a dark chapter of American history that many had tried to bury. Emma Crawford's image, frozen in that moment of staged joy and hidden terror, became a symbol of the countless children whose stories had been erased from official records. Sometimes the most horrifying discoveries hide in plain sight, waiting for someone to look closely enough to see the truth. History is full of secrets that powerful people hoped would stay buried forever. But photographs don't lie, even when everything else has been destroyed. The next time you see an old photograph, look carefully at every detail. You might discover that what seems like an innocent moment captured in time is actually evidence of something far more sinister. The past has a way of revealing its secrets to those brave enough to seek the truth.